Vulnerability, it's a word that makes some people squirm. It can feel scary, risky. We think of vulnerability as weakness, as exposure to potential hurt. But here's the truth. Vulnerability is courage. Vulnerability is about showing up authentically without armor. It's saying, here I am, flaws and all. In relationships, vulnerability is the key. It unlocks intimacy, trust, and connection. Without vulnerability, we build walls, not bridges. We keep people at a distance, afraid to let them see the real us. But true connection requires vulnerability. It requires us to be brave, to be open, to let someone else in. Vulnerability is often misunderstood. Many of us have been taught to hide our true selves, to put on a brave face, to never show weakness. But in reality, vulnerability is not about being weak. It's about being real. It's about being honest with ourselves and with others. When we allow ourselves to be vulnerable, we open up a world of possibilities. We allow ourselves to experience deeper connections, to build stronger relationships, and to grow as individuals. Vulnerability is the birthplace of innovation, creativity, and change. Think about the moments in your life when you felt truly connected to someone. Chances are those moments involved vulnerability. They involved sharing a part of yourself that you usually keep hidden. They involved taking a risk, and in return, you were met with understanding, empathy, and love. Vulnerability is not just important in personal relationships, but also in our professional lives. Leaders who are willing to be vulnerable create environments where their teams feel safe to take risks, to be creative, and to innovate. They build trust and foster a sense of belonging. So how can we embrace vulnerability in our own lives? It starts with self-awareness. We need to recognize our own fears and insecurities and understand that it's okay to have them. We need to practice self-compassion and give ourselves permission to be imperfect. Next, we need to take small steps towards vulnerability. This could mean sharing something personal with a friend, asking for help when we need it, or expressing our true feelings. It's about being honest and authentic, even when it's uncomfortable. In relationships, vulnerability is the key. It unlocks intimacy, trust, and connection. Without vulnerability, we build walls, not bridges. We keep people at a distance, afraid to let them see the real us. But true connection requires vulnerability. It requires us to be brave, to be open, to let someone else in. Remember, vulnerability is not a one-time act. It's a practice. It's something we need to cultivate and nurture every day. It's about showing up, even when it's hard. It's about being present, even when we want to hide. It's about being real, even when we're afraid. Without vulnerability, we build walls, not bridges. We keep people at a distance, afraid to let them see the real us. But true connection requires vulnerability. It requires us to be brave, to be open, to let someone else in. So let's embrace vulnerability. Let's be brave enough to show up as our true selves. Let's be open enough to let others in. And let's be kind enough to ourselves to know that it's okay to be vulnerable. Because in the end, vulnerability is not a weakness, it's our greatest strength. But true connection requires vulnerability. It requires us to be brave, to be open, to let someone else in. It requires us to be brave, to be open, to let someone else in. So let's take that step together. Let's embrace vulnerability and discover the beauty and strength that lies within it. From a young age, men are often taught to suppress their emotions. They are conditioned to believe that showing feelings is a sign of weakness. This early conditioning shapes their emotional landscape, creating a foundation where vulnerability is not just avoided, but actively shunned. Be strong, we tell them. Don't cry. These simple phrases, repeated over and over, become ingrained in their psyche. They learn to equate strength with silence and resilience with emotional suppression. Society builds a man box, a set of expectations that limit how men can express themselves. This man box dictates that to be a real man, one must adhere to a narrow definition of masculinity. It restricts emotional expression to anger or stoicism, leaving little room for anything else. Strength becomes synonymous with stoicism. The ability to endure without complaint is celebrated, while the need for emotional support is often dismissed. This creates a culture where men feel they must always appear invulnerable. Vulnerability is seen as weak, unmanly. Men are discouraged from sharing their fears, their doubts, and their pain. This stigma around vulnerability prevents them from seeking help when they need it most. This pressure to conform can be suffocating, preventing men from experiencing the full range of human emotions. It creates an emotional prison where the fear of being judged or ridiculed keeps them from opening up. These societal expectations have real consequences. The inability to express emotions can lead to mental health issues such as depression and anxiety. It can also result in unhealthy coping mechanisms like substance abuse or aggression. Men may struggle to form deep, meaningful connections. The fear of appearing weak can prevent them from building the kind of supportive relationships that are essential for emotional well-being. They may fear judgment for expressing vulnerability, leading to emotional isolation. This isolation can be devastating, making it difficult for men to find the support they need to navigate life's challenges. Ghosting. It's a modern dating phenomenon with ancient roots. Throughout history, people have disappeared from each other's lives, sometimes out of necessity, sometimes out of cruelty. Think about letters left unanswered, calls never returned. The pain of being ignored is not new. But technology has amplified ghosting, making it easier and more common than ever. In the digital age, ghosting can happen with a swipe, a block, a sudden silence. It's the ultimate form of emotional avoidance, leaving the ghosted person bewildered and hurt. Ghosting isn't just bad manners, it's a form of emotional cruelty that can have lasting effect. Imagine being deeply invested in someone only to have them vanish without a trace. The silence is deafening. It leaves you questioning your worth, wondering what you did wrong. Ghosting triggers feelings of rejection, abandonment, and self-doubt. It's a wound that can take time to heal, leaving you wary of future connections. Ghosting reinforces the fear of vulnerability, making it even harder to open up again. Decoding the ghost, understanding the reasons behind it. Ghosting, the act of suddenly cutting off all communication without explanation, can be a bewildering and painful experience for the person on the receiving end. But why do people ghost? What drives someone to disappear without a trace? Let's delve deeper into the psychology behind this phenomenon. While ghosting is never okay, understanding the reasons behind it can be helpful. It can provide some closure and help you move forward. One common reason for ghosting is fear. Fear of confrontation, fear of the unknown, or fear of emotional vulnerability. The ghoster might feel overwhelmed by the intensity of their emotions or the situation and choose to escape rather than face it head-on. Sometimes ghosting stems from fear. The ghoster may be afraid of confrontation, of hurting the other person's feelings, or of dealing with their own emotions. This fear can paralyze them, making it easier to vanish than to communicate openly and honestly. The ghoster may be afraid of confrontation, of hurting the other person's feelings. They might believe that disappearing is a kinder option, sparing both parties from an uncomfortable conversation. However, this often leaves the ghosted person with more questions than answers. In other cases, it's about self-preservation. The ghoster may feel that they need to protect themselves from emotional pain or stress. They might be dealing with their own personal issues, such as mental health struggles, that make it difficult for them to maintain a relationship. The ghoster may be emotionally unavailable, unable or unwilling to invest in a relationship. They might lack the capacity to handle the emotional demands of a relationship, leading them to withdraw completely. This emotional unavailability can stem from past traumas, unresolved issues, or simply a lack of readiness for a committed relationship. They may lack the emotional maturity to communicate their needs directly. Instead of expressing their feelings and concerns, they choose the easier route of disappearing. This lack of communication skills can be frustrating for the person left behind. But it's important to recognize that it reflects the ghoster's limitations, not your own. It's crucial to remember that ghosting says more about the ghoster than the ghosted. It's a reflection of their own emotional limitations, not your worthiness. Understanding this can help you find peace and move forward, knowing that the ghosting was not a reflection of your value or desirability. It's a reflection of their own emotional limitations, not your worthiness. By recognizing the reasons behind ghosting, you can begin to heal and focus on building healthier, more communicative relationships in the future. So how can men break free from the man box and embrace vulnerability? It starts with self-awareness. Recognize the societal messages you've internalized and challenge them. Allow yourself to feel the full spectrum of your emotions. It's okay to be sad, scared, or hurt. Seek out support from trusted friends, family, or therapists. Embrace vulnerability as a strength, not a weakness. It takes courage to be open, to show your true self, and the rewards of vulnerability far outweigh the risks. Being ghosted can be incredibly painful. Allow yourself to grieve the loss of the potential relationship. Don't blame yourself. Remember, ghosting is about the other person's limitations, not your worth. Focus on rebuilding your self-esteem. Engage in activities that bring you joy and remind you of your value. Talk to someone you trust about your experience. Sharing your feelings can help you process the emotions. Remember, you deserve to be treated with respect and consideration. Don't settle for anything less than open and honest communication in your relationships. Open communication is essential for healthy relationships. This means being honest about your feelings, needs, and boundaries. It means being willing to have difficult conversations with empathy and respect. Practice active listening. Pay attention to your partner's words and nonverbal cues. Seek to understand their perspective, even if you don't agree with it. Remember that relationships are a two-way street. Both partners need to feel safe and comfortable expressing themselves. When communication flows freely, intimacy and trust can flourish. Imagine a world where vulnerability is celebrated, not shamed. Where men and women alike feel empowered to show up authentically, flaws and all. This is the future we need to create. It starts with each of us challenging outdated gender norms and embracing vulnerability as a strength. It means creating safe spaces for open communication and emotional expression. By choosing courage over comfort, we can cultivate deeper, more meaningful connections. We can build a world where authenticity is valued and ghosting becomes a relic of the past.